with Dr. Michael Koren. He is a renowned cardiologist, and you know him from his work here at WOKV with Med Evidence. Good morning, Dr. Koren.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for joining us. The last time you were on, you were most gracious because I asked you a whole bunch of questions that had nothing to do with the topic that you really wanted to talk about.
I love questions, all questions, so they're perfectly okay.
Well, it goes to your credibility and your flexibility, and we appreciate that. So, gene editing and cholesterol. So, before we really get into the meat of this, people hear gene editing and they get very nervous. I think when we were talking in the green room earlier, I had said, are you talking about gene splicing, and is this about, changing genes so that, my daughter has purple eyes instead of green?
Well, when I first heard of gene editing, I was also very nervous. But we've actually been involved in gene type therapy studies for a number of years now. And there's been a number of scientific breakthroughs that make this really feasible. We believe it will be safe, and it can potentially be life-changing for certain people.
So this is not gene splicing, and how are
No.
gene splicing and gene editing different?
So the first notion that I'll address is the concept of your genes changing. So I don't know if you realize this, but your DNA is constantly being damaged and repaired. The simplest example is that you go out to the beach, UV radiation hits your skin cells, it damages your DNA, and your body has the ability to repair that. So your body is constantly repairing DNA. And what we've learned with Nobel Prize winning technology is that you may be able to take this natural ability of the body to heal its own DNA and use it to inactivate genes that do us harm. So it's an incredible way of taking a natural process and using it for a therapeutic effect.
Is this new technology and based on new discoveries, or has this been around for a long time and we're just learning now how to kind of manipulate it?
Yeah, it's a combination. It's a combination of several Nobel Prize winning technologies. So, for example, there is a bad protein that we've developed drugs against called PCSK9. And there are actually drugs in the market that we've worked on here in Jacksonville, helped develop. Two of them that you might have heard of are Repatha and Praluent. And these are drugs that use antibodies to neutralize the effect of this bad protein that leads to very high cholesterol levels.
Can you go back and just define for us what a bad protein is?
Sure. PCSK9 is a protein that was not even known to us prior to the year 2000. And when we started to look at DNA, we found these proteins that we weren't sure what they meant. So the science behind this is absolutely fascinating. We found that certain people don't make the protein PCSK9. And people who do not make the protein PCSK9 have extremely low cholesterol levels, but live perfectly normal lives, except they don't have heart attacks or strokes because their cholesterol levels are low. So this is what we call a natural history experiment, showing that people that have a certain genetic predisposition are protected. And we then learn that people that have high levels of PCSK9 do worse. They have very high levels of cholesterol, and they're much more likely to have a heart attack or stroke or need bypass surgery. So with that knowledge, that natural history knowledge, we're able to develop pharmaceutical products that reverse the effect of PCSK9. And that's one of many proteins that are involved in cholesterol metabolism that we can now target for the benefit of our patients.
And do we know why some people have this and some people don't? Is it just good genes?
Chance, again, I always like to say that the most important thing in life is to pick good parents, but sometimes we don't have that much control over that. I'm being facetious, of course. But when, in some cases you're handed really good genes, in some cases you're handed genes that you have to kind of deal with. But the beauty is that now, through these real breakthroughs in science, we're able to take genes that can do us harm and actually edit them so that they stop doing us harm.
So that sounds a little sci-fi, but not for bad reasons. Can someone find out if they have these, or do they have to be enrolled in one of your studies?
No, we're doing programs right now. We're actually working on a couple of programs that take people that have high cholesterol or high triglycerides. We'll do an analysis as part of the study, and we'll get your genetics and figure out what your genetics are. And then if you're an appropriate patient, we may get you involved in the program. Although we're going to screen a lot of people before we find the right patients. So just from a practical sense, we at Jacksonville Center for Clinical Research compete with companies around the world for these projects. And we've been fortunate enough to get some grants to study these gene editing projects. And we're in early phases. These are programs that started overseas. They usually do. The programs that we're involved with now started in New Zealand, Australia, and the UK. And there have been dozens of patients in those places that have been enrolled, and now they're ready for the United States. And we hope to be maybe even the first center in the United States to actually treat patients with this new technology. And the technology has three incredibly important parts, all Nobel Prize winning. First, we give this particular medicine in something called lipid nanoparticles. And this is these little fat cells, very, very small microscopic fat cells that deliver the therapy to liver cells and no other place. So it's highly, highly targeted just to liver cells. So you asked about changing the color of your eyes. That's not going to happen because your germ cells, the cells you give to your kids, are not affected. It's only the cells in your liver. Once it gets into a liver cell, then there's another technology that goes right to the gene that's causing the problem, whether that's PCSK9 or another gene called ANGPTL3. This is a very specific tag so that the therapy goes to that gene. And then what happens is that when it gets to the gene, it just nicks the DNA. And because of natural healing processes, that nick of the DNA is healed in a way that that gene becomes inactive. So it's absolutely fascinating. It's now been studied in dozens of people, and we're now doing the early phase studies here in the US, and I couldn't be more excited.
Continue our conversation with Dr. Michael Koren, and thank you again for staying with us a little bit longer after the break. So we're talking about gene editing therapy, and for those of you who are just joining us, this is not changing eye color. This is not, deciding what kind of genes your children should have. This is specifically targeted for people who are at risk of certain diseases and
heart attacks and strokes
Okay.
and bypass surgery
okay.
for cholesterol and triglyceride problems.
Okay, and people who have these problems, do they know that they have these problems because of previous appointments with doctors, or is it something that you're able to identify?
They often do. So the typical patients that would benefit from these type of programs are people who've had a heart attack or stroke, or people who have a very strong family history of heart disease. So a typical patient would be somebody that has a condition called familial hypercholesterolemia, or FH, and that family would look like a dad had a heart attack when he was 42. Mom had bypass surgery when she was 56. Uncle Tony had bypass surgery when he was 60. So multiple members of the family who have had complications of heart disease will typically have these patterns where your cholesterol is very high. In many cases, total cholesterol will be above 300 and LDL cholesterol will be above 200. Sometimes even LDL cholesterol above 300. So these are the type of patients that have genetic problems. And we have multiple ways of treating that now, statins, PCSK9 inhibitors, but even still, patients in this category sometimes need 3 or 4 medications to get their LDL cholesterol down to a safe level. And now we think through gene editing, we can make that process much easier.
So is there an age range that's best for this type of therapy, or is it changing as we learn more?
Well, we're learning, and as mentioned in the last segment, this is something that has been tried in dozens of people outside the US, and the first US exposures are now happening as we speak. I'm proud to say here in Florida, we have sites around Florida that will be sending people to Jacksonville for the dosing of this particular product. So we're super excited about that. But getting back to your question, we're gaining experience with this. So we'll figure out exactly what the right dose is. We'll figure out exactly which patients get the most benefit. But right now, we're looking for people that have pretty severe problems with their cholesterol or triglycerides, and also people that have had complications. So if you're a perfectly healthy 40-year-old with a high cholesterol, there's a lot of things we can do before we do gene editing. On the other hand, if you're a 40-year-old who has familial hypercholesterolemia, has already had bypass surgery, and is struggling to take the medications that you need to get the cholesterol down, you may be a super good candidate for the program.
So this is for people who are all over the state, and they would be coming to Jacksonville to get this.
That is correct, yes.
So,
by the way, they can come from out of the state. We're not prejudiced against Georgia or Alabama.
That's good to hear. For some families, I think a lot of people think, yeah, we have heart issues in our family. It's genetic. We have heart issues. But from what you're saying, may not be the heart. It may be some underlying cause that then causes stress on the heart, like triglycerides or cholesterol.
That's exactly right. So certain genes, when they're expressed, can actually make it more difficult for the liver to do its job of clearing cholesterol from the circulation. And one of those genes is called PCSK9, as I mentioned in the last segment. And that gene can actually be neutralized with different ways, and we believe we can neutralize it now with gene editing therapy.
So we all know people who can eat and eat and eat whatever they want and not gain a pound or have a cholesterol problem. Those are people who you say
Genetically blessed people.
genetically blessed people. And likewise, there are people who are vegetarian. So I'm vegetarian.
Mm-hmm.
When I first became a vegetarian, my triglycerides and cholesterol as a teenager were through the roof.
Really?
How does that happen?
Well, you'd have to come to my office and I'd have to analyze your blood chemistry a lot more, and then I'd give you an exact definition. But it's possible that you have gene expression of certain genes that predispose you to that profile.
So, and what do you eat for breakfast? And I'm asking this because are there things that people who have genetically high triglycerides or high cholesterol can do to help modify their diets in addition to or as a precursor to gene editing? But for example, what do you eat for breakfast?
So the exact answer to that question would be I had pita bread and hummus and black coffee this morning. I eat sardines a lot for breakfast. I love the concept of eating more omega-3 fatty acids, and I eat very little red meat. So I wouldn't say I'm entirely vegetarian, but I eat a lot of vegetables and fish as my main protein.
So that thing that's all over social media right now that says you should try 3 days of sardines and nothing but sardines to kind of cleanse your system. Good idea, bad idea?
I don't know if it cleanses your system, but it certainly won't cleanse your breath.
And your friends in your proximity probably because of your breath. So for people who want to get involved, what are the prerequisites, and then what is the number that they need to reach out to you?
Sure. So if you're interested in this concept, or you just want us to evaluate your cholesterol situation, we have lots of programs that are ongoing for cholesterol and triglycerides. Get in touch with us through EncoreDocs.com. That's like, give me an Encore, ENCOREDOCS.com, EncoreDocs.com, or call us at 904-730-0166, 904-730-0166, and one of our people will schedule an appointment, get some information, meet with one of our doctors or coordinators, and we'll see if you're a good fit for the programs that we're working on. And if you seem to be a good fit for this gene editing program, one of the benefits, whether or not you do the program, by the way, is we'll do a genetic analysis and see whether or not you actually have familial hypercholesterolemia or one of these genetic dyslipidemias.
So sometimes people call a number or they'll hesitate to call because they don't really know what they're asking for. Is it okay for someone to call to get information from you guys and say, hey, I heard Dr. Koren on the radio. I want to be evaluated, but I don't know exactly what I want to be evaluated for.
You absolutely can do that. Just say, well, you heard me on the radio, or you heard that we're doing gene editing studies, or you just want to get healthier. and we'll see what pathway works best. We talked about weight loss programs that we're doing on the last program, and that may be a better solution, but a lot of people don't have a terrible cholesterol problem, and if they get their weight down to where it should be, their cholesterol problem is controlled. But of course, there are people that have these severe forms of cholesterol problems that need something more than just weight control.
The number one more time
is 904-730-0166.
Dr. Michael Koren,